This is Bluebook Digital SAT number 9, Reading and Writing Module 1. Researchers have struggled to pinpoint specific causes for hiccups, which happen when a person's diaphragm contracts blank. However, neuroscientist KW has found that these uncontrollable contractions play an important role in helping infants regulate their breathing. Is it involuntarily, beneficially, strenuously, or smoothly? Well, you can match uncontrollable contractions with involuntary. And of course, we all know that hiccups happen without us consciously wishing it to happen. So involuntary is the best answer. OZ's contributions to the field of linguistics are blank. Her many accomplishments include working as a linguistics professor and bilingual poet, authoring the first TO grammar book, and co-founding the American Indian Language Development Institute. So this colon sets up a list. The fact that she has done all of these things would make her contributions to the field widespread or excellent. Let's see. Pragmatic, controversial, extensive, universal. Extensive makes the most sense. Notice that I had guessed widespread, sort of a diverse range of excellent achievements. Some researchers believe that the genes that enable groundhogs and certain other mammals to hibernate throughout the winter by slowing their breathing and heart rates and lowering their body temperatures may be blank in humans, present yet having essentially no effect on our bodily processes. Notice that the colon again sets up a definition. So the word literally means present but having essentially no effect on our processes. So this is a vestigial attribute, as in a vestige of the evolutionary past. Groundhogs, of course, use this attribute. In humans, it exists, but doesn't get actively used. It comes from the Latin for to sleep, which is dormant. It's not decisive or lacking or variable. Dormant, as in latent. Although science fiction was dominated mostly by white male authors when Octavia Butler, a black woman, began writing, she did not view the genre as blank. Butler broke into the field with the publication of several short stories and her 1976 novel Pattern Master, and she later became the first science fiction writer to win a prestigious MacArthur Fellowship. Again with these colons. So in this case, the colon means that what comes after follows through and confirms the fact. So her not viewing it as blank is proven by the fact that she broke into the field. In this case, broke into hints very literally at the definition of this word. It's impenetrable. So she did not view it as impenetrable. She did not think that you could not enter. So she was able to enter. Oral histories, whether they consist of interviews or recordings of songs and stories, can offer researchers a rich view of people's everyday experiences. For her book about coal mining communities in Kentucky during the 20th century, KB therefore relied in part on interviews with coal miners and their families. By doing so, she gained valuable insights into her subjects' day-to-day lives. Best describes the function of the underlined sentence. It provides a little-known geographical fact about Kentucky. Don't think so, because it doesn't say anything specifically about Kentucky in that sentence. It argues that KB is an expert on U.S. politics. No. It presents a major historical event that took place in the 20th century. I don't think so, not in what's underlined. It describes how KB benefited from incorporating oral history in her book. Yeah, which is the by doing so, as in by incorporating the oral history, she gained that insight. Following text is from Sarah Orne Jewett's 1899 short story, Martha's Lady. Martha is employed by Miss Pine as a maid. Miss Pine sat by the window watching in her best dress, looking stately and calm. She seldom went out now, and it was almost time for the carriage. Martha was just coming in from the garden with the strawberries, and with more flowers in her apron. It was a bright, cool evening in June. The golden robins sang in the elms, and the sun was going down behind the apple trees at the foot of the garden. The beautiful old house stood wide open to the long-expected guest. The main purpose of the text. Well, let's envision the scene. They're mentioning a guest who is not named and hasn't arrived yet. Martha is the maid working outside. Miss Pine is the owner of the home. Miss Pine is relaxing, looking at the beautiful scene, waiting for her guest to arrive. while Martha is working outside, but in this sort of beautiful language of gathering strawberries. Convey the worries brought about by a new guest? Definitely not. Describe how the characters have changed over time? No. To contrast the activity indoors with the stillness outside? I don't think so. To depict the setting as the characters await a visitor's arrival? Sure, has to be D. The following text is adapted from George Bernard Shaw's 1912 play Pygmalion. Henry Higgins has just arrived at the house of his mother, Mrs. Higgins. She is expecting her friends to visit soon. I'm serious, Henry. You offend all my friends. They stop coming whenever they meet you. Nonsense. I know I have no small talk, but people don't mind. Oh, don't they? Small talk indeed. What about your large talk? Really, dear, you mustn't stay. So the mom is telling the son, don't stay, as in don't remain here when my friends arrive. The main purpose, to describe what Henry's mother does when she goes out with her friends. No. To show that Henry's mother wants him to leave. That sounds good. To present a detailed account of what Henry's home, well, no, because they're in the mom's home. To explain why Henry often no, just has to be B. In response to concerns that some recent financial crises were exacerbated by consumers misunderstanding risks associated with credit cards, loans, and other financial products, policymakers in many countries have instituted risk disclosure requirements on sellers of those products. E.S. et al. Investigated a variety of risk disclosure messages sent to thousands of credit card customers and found that the messages had only small and short-lived effects on behavior. S. et al. Asserted that such effects may nevertheless be worth pursuing given the negligible cost of messaging. Which choice best describes the function of the underlined portion of the text as a whole? So, given the negligible cost of messaging. I think what they're saying here is when you reach out to warn people that there might be dangers of borrowing money, it has only a small and short-lived effect on behavior, as in it only changes people's behaviors for a short time and moderately. They assert that those effects may nevertheless be worth pursuing, as in it's still worth doing that given the negligible cost of messaging. So the meaning of the underline is because it doesn't cost much to warn people, it's still worth doing even if it only helps a little bit. Okay. It notes a factor that led S et al. To not dismiss risk disclosure messaging altogether despite their evidence of its limited utility. That actually sounds good. Let's leave that. It acknowledges a type of risk disclosure messaging that S et al. May not have fully accounted for in their study. No. It describes a consideration that explains why S et al. Recommended risk disclosure messaging even though its effects may be small relative to its costs. Describes a consideration that explains why they recommended it. I don't think they're recommending it themselves. They're investigating it. It points out a circumstance that S et al. Conceded may make risk disclosure messaging more effective than their study suggests. No, it's A, right? Because you can match, despite their evidence of its limited utility, matches with even though it only has small and short-lived effects on behavior. Following text is adapted from Charles W. C's 1901 novel The Marrow of Tradition. Mrs. O was a woman of strong individuality whose comments upon her acquaintances, present or absent, were marked by a frankness at times no less than startling. This characteristic caused her to be more or less avoided. Mrs. O was aware of this sentiment on the part of her acquaintances and rather exulted in it. So she has a frankness about commenting on her friends and acquaintances that's no less than startling. So someone who's very outspoken probably says critical things about the people around her. This characteristic caused her to be more or less avoided, as in people stayed away from her. But then she actually exulted in it, right? She took pride in being outspoken and critical. Based on the text, what is true about her acquaintances? They try to refrain from discussing topics that would upset Mrs. O. Don't think so. They are unable to spend as much time with Mrs. O as she would like. Definitely not. They are too preoccupied with their own concerns. No. They are likely offended by what Mrs. O has said about them. Yes. because she had a frankness no less than startling. So she said harsh things to her friends that startled them, and then they therefore stayed away. So it's just this. Mrs. Spring Fragrance is a 1912 short story by S.S.F. In the story, Mrs. Spring Fragrance, a Chinese immigrant living in Seattle, is traveling in California. In letters to her husband and friends, she demonstrates her concern for what's happening at her home in Seattle while she is away, : So the colon sets up the proof of the point. So whatever the letter is, it's her writing from California back to Seattle, Washington, saying, I hope everything is home back there in Seattle. Which quotation most effectively illustrates the claim? My honorable cousin is preparing for the Fifth Moon Festival and wishes me to compound for the occasion some American fudge, for which delectable sweet made by my clumsy hands you have sometimes shown a slight prejudice. I don't think it's that, because that doesn't mention what's happening back home in Seattle. Next week, I accompany Aoi to the beauteous town of San Jose. There we will... No, because again, that's not talking about what's happening back in Seattle. Forget not to care for the cat, the birds, and the flowers. Do not eat too quickly, nor fan too vigorously now that the weather is warming. It must be that, I think, because that's talking about what's happening back in Seattle, a concern for what's happening at her home. I am enjoying a most agreeable visit, and American friends, as also our own, strive benevolently for the accomplishment. No, it's just C. A student is examining a long, challenging poem that was initially published in a quarterly journal without explanatory notes, then later republished in a standalone volume containing only that poem and accompanying explanatory notes written by the poet. The student asserts that the explanatory notes were included in the republication primarily as a marketing device to help sell the standalone volume. So first there was the poem published in a book of poetry, but then later it was republished on its own with extra notes written by the poet. And this student is asserting that the notes are only in there as a marketing device to help sell it. Okay? Which statement, if true, would most directly support the student's claim? The text of the poem as published in the quarterly journal is not identical to the text of the poem published in the standalone volume. Maybe. I don't think that really proves that it was done as a marketing device, so let's leave that. Many critics believe that the poet's explanatory notes remove certain ambiguities of the poem and make it less interesting as a result. Again, that doesn't seem like a marketing device to help sell it. The publishers of the standalone volume requested the explanatory notes from the poet in order to make the book attractive to readers who already had a copy of the poem in a journal issue. That seems like marketing, right? To make the book attractive. Correspondence between the poet and the publisher reveals that the poet's explanatory notes went through several drafts. The drafting doesn't directly relate to marketing, so make the book attractive to readers seems to directly relate to marketing. Metal contents of plants with and without K exposure. So without K exposure, both zinc and iron are higher, and with K exposure, both zinc and iron are lower. So whatever this K stuff does, when you expose it to K, both of these metals are lower. Many plants lose their leaf color when exposed to K, an antibiotic produced by some soil microorganisms. Spelman College biologist M.A. and her colleagues hypothesized that plants' response to K exposure involves altering their uptake of metals such as iron and zinc. The researchers grew two groups of seedlings of the plant AT, half of which were exposed to K and half of which were a control group without exposure to K, and measured the plant's metal content 5 days after germination. So without K is the controls, and with K is what they're testing. Okay? Which choice best describes it in the graph that support A and her colleagues' hypothesis? So when it says this, I always look back at the actual hypothesis. Hypothesized that plants' response to K exposure involves altering their uptake of metals such as iron and zinc. Well, just on the face of it, this seems to directly confirm that, because with the K, they're both lower. They're both lower metal content. The control plants contained higher levels of zinc than iron, but plants exposed to K contained higher levels of iron than zinc. That's not even true, though, because That doesn't make sense, and it's not true because the black on the right is actually lower than the zinc, so it's definitely not that. Both groups of plants contain more than 200 parts per million of both iron and zinc. That's true, but not the answer. So, of course, all 4 of the bars are above 200, but that doesn't prove the point because you have to compare what happened without K and with K. Zinc levels were around 300 parts per million in the control plants, but nearly 400 parts per million in the plants exposed to K. Well, that's not even correct, right? That's backwards, and it doesn't make sense. So it has to be the last one. The plants exposed to K showed lower levels of iron and zinc than the control plants did. Yes, as in with K, they were both different in a logical manner. It's also not any of the other choices. Characteristics of 5 recently discovered gas exoplanets. Hot Jupiters are gas planets that have a mass of at least 0.25 Jupiters, meaning that their mass is at least 25% of that of Jupiter, and an orbital period of less than 10 days, meaning that they complete one orbit around their star in less than 10 days, while warm Jupiters are gas planets that meet the same mass criterion but have orbital periods of more than 10 days. So you're looking at the mass and the orbital period. It looks like the radius and the distance from the sun in parsecs don't factor into this unless I'm missing something. So we're looking at just these columns to classify the planets in these 2 new naming schemes. In 2021, Michigan State University astronomer J.R. and colleagues announced the discovery of 5 new gas exoplanets and asserted that 4 are hot Jupiters and 1 is a warm Jupiter. 4 are hot and 1 is warm. Okay? Which choice best describes data from the table that support R and colleagues' assertions? None of the planets have an orbital period of more than 10 days, and 628b has a mass of 6.33. Well, that's just wrong because one of them is more than 10 days, right? This is more than 10 days, so it can't be that. 1478b has an orbital period of 153 days. Well, again, that's just wrong. That's looking at the wrong piece of information. That's distance from the sun, so no. All the planets have a radius between 1.06 and 1.77. That is true, but I don't think that the radius figured in, right? Because we highlighted the pink and the blue as the criteria that mattered. So it seems like it should be the last one. Each of the planets has a mass greater than 0.25 Jupiters, right, which is mentioned here and here where it says same mass criterion. And all except 1478b have an orbital period of less than 10 days. Yes, so the top 3 and the bottom one are less than 10 days, but this one right here, 1478b, is more than 10 days, so it is a warm Jupiter rather than a hot Jupiter. Archaeologist C.K. and her team excavated the Egyptian tomb of Queen M, the wife of the first dynasty pharaoh. Some scholars claim that she also ruled Egypt on her own and was actually the first female pharaoh. The team found a tablet in M's tomb with writing suggesting that she was in charge of the country's treasury and other central offices. Whether M was a pharaoh or not, this discovery supports the idea that M likely had an important role in Egypt's government, lived after rather than before the first dynasty of Egypt. Well, I don't think it could prove that. It's not about chronological. Traveled beyond Egypt's borders often. What? No, the fact that she was in charge of the country's treasury and other central offices, as in did other things in the government, seems like it's just A. Created a new form of writing. No, that one actually seems very straightforward. The widespread use of social media enables linguists to study changes in language usage in real time. A notable recent example is the proliferation of the affix meng among speakers of Bahasa Indonesian, the official language of Indonesia. Linguists observed meng originate as an onomatopoetic tag that social media users applied to images of cats they posted. Onomatopoetic, as in it makes the sound of the word that it's describing. The word is the sound like pop or bang or meng. I think meng is kind of like meow. Right? It's the Indonesian equivalent of, we say meow in English for a cat, okay? Over time, users increasingly applied it as a prefix to existing words, e.g., meng sede affixes meng to the word for sad, okay? As in meow sad. From there, it has begun to move into spoken Bahasa Indonesia. Linguists have noted many similar examples of this phenomenon occurring in other languages, suggesting that social media is more useful for studying informal language than for studying formal or official language. I don't think so. That actually theoretically could be true, but that's not what's proven right here. Appears to be exerting an exceptionally strong influence on the evolution of Bahasa Indonesia. I don't think so, because they're saying it occurred in other languages as well. So they're trying to make a more general point here. May give linguists a somewhat misleading sense of how languages are changing. No, I think it's very realistic. It's very on-the-ground, real-life, everyday usage. Does not merely register changes in language, but can facilitate such changes. Interesting. So people start using the meow prefix in one place for one thing. Then they start using it as a prefix to other existing words. Then that becomes part of the regular spoken language rather than just the texting on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. And this has happened in other places. So it actually is D as in dog. Interesting process. For thousands of years, people in the Americas blank the bottle gourd, a large bitter fruit with a thick rind, to make bottles, other types of containers, and even musical instruments. Oddly, there is no evidence that any type of bottle gourd is native to the Western Hemisphere. Either the fruit or its seeds must have somehow been carried from Asia or Africa. For thousands of years, people in the Americas have used the bottle gourd. Yeah, to make things. Have used. L.M. at the University of Chile observed that alkaline soils contain an insoluble form of iron that blueberry plants cannot absorb, thus inhibiting blueberry growth. If these plants were grown in alkaline soil alongside grasses that aid in iron solubilization, blank, M was determined to find out. So this is it a declarative sentence or is it a question? If these plants were grown in alkaline soil alongside grasses that aid in iron solubilization, could the blueberries thrive? Well, it's definitely not A. The blueberries could thrive. M was determined to find out. Yet the follow-through after it is this person wanting to answer the question. So it's D as in dog, right? If they were grown in the other soil, could they thrive? He was determined to find out, or she was determined to find out. The intense pressure found in the deep ocean can affect the structure of proteins in fish's cells, distorting the protein shape. The chemical trimethylamine N oxide counters this effect, ensuring that proteins retain their original blank. Is found in high concentrations in the cells of the deepest dwelling fish. It seems like this needs to be a new sentence, but let's look at the answer choices. The chemical TMAO counters this effect, ensuring that proteins retain their original configurations, period. TMAO is found in high concentrations. It seems that it's that. Definitely not B as in boy, reading it straight through just blurs it. C as in cat would be a comma splice. This would have to be a period and a capital T, so that comma would be attempting to conjoin together two sentences, so it's not that. And D as in dog with a conjunction I don't think works, but let me say it with D as in dog. The chemical TMAO counters this effect, ensuring that proteins retain their original configurations, and TMAO is found in high concentrations in the cell. No, because if you said it like that, it would almost make it seem like it was ensuring two things. The first thing being that proteins retain their original configurations, and the second thing being that TMAO is found in. It would be ensuring that itself is found in, which is wrong and hard to read. Mathematician GP, sometimes in conjunction with mathematicians RSH and STY, blank credited with proving the Poincaré conjecture. Having built on Hamilton's previous work to solve the proof, P has insisted that Hamilton receive credit. Y later found enclosed gaps in P's proof, persuading some mathematicians that he deserves credit as well. This is just subject-verb agreement, but the actual subject is just this one person. Mathematician GP, comma, along with whomever, or sometimes in conjunction with whomever, but that doesn't matter. Everything from here to here you can effectively set aside for the purposes of matching the subject and verb. It just is the only one that's singular. Jetties. Now, based on what I just said a moment ago, this is another instance where you could probably jump over all of this. So for the simplicity of reading the sentence, ignore what's between the dashes for a moment. Jetties are often constructed to protect coastlines from erosion. Jetties can sometimes have the opposite. Obstructing the natural flow of sand along the shore can lead to increased erosion in some areas. Well, you can eliminate the wrong ones by the rules of what makes a full sentence. For example, C as in cat, what comes after the semicolon is not a full sentence, so it can't be that. I'll say what comes after the semicolon. Though obstructing the natural flow of sand along the shore can lead to increased erosion in some areas, that's not a sentence. D as in dog would be a comma splice. Jetties can sometimes have the opposite effect, though. Obstructing the natural flow of sand along the shore can lead to... No, because this is a sentence. That's why it's not D as in dog, because the comma after the though would be a comma splice. Now, A and B are both grammatically valid. A is the correct answer. B does not make sense. Let me say it with B as in boy. Jetties can sometimes have the opposite effect, though obstructing the natural flow of sand along the shore can lead to increased erosion in some areas. That's theoretically grammatically valid, but it doesn't make sense because these actually don't go against each other. They agree. The fact it has the opposite effect goes together with obstructing the natural flow causes problems. So the correct answer is A. It's all about the phrasing and intonation here. Let me say it out loud with the correct answer. Jetties can sometimes have the opposite effect, though. Obstructing the natural flow of sand along the shore can lead to increased erosion in some areas. Yeah, they can have the opposite effect, though. That falling tone makes it clearer. Archaeologist SB explains why the 7th century ship burial site in Sutton Hoo in England was likely the tomb of a king. First, the gold artifacts inside the ship suggest that the person buried with him was a wealthy and respected leader. Blank, the massive effort required to bury the ship would likely only have been undertaken for a king. Instead, still, specifically, second. This one actually seems very straightforward. It literally says, first, whatever, second, whatever. Unless this is a trick. First, something, second. Sure. You could have also said furthermore or additionally, but it's not, definitely not instead. It's not still because that doesn't go against it in any way. It's not specifically because this isn't more detail about the first fact, so it's just second. Earth's auroras result, broadly speaking, from the sun's activity. Blank, the sun releases charged particles that are captured by Earth's magnetic field and channeled toward the poles. These particles then collide with atoms in the atmosphere, causing the atoms to emit auroral light. The most logical transition. Earth's auroras are, broadly speaking, from the sun's activity. Well, it seems like all of this is a much more detailed explanation of how the auroras actually come about. So it should be specifically. It's not similarly because they're not in parallel. It doesn't go against it, and it's not cause and effect. The Coastal Virginia Offshore Wind Project is anticipated to generate 2.6 gigawatts of energy, enough to power almost 1 million homes. As its name indicates, the project, currently in development, consists of wind turbines located off the Virginia coast. Blank, the project calls for 176 large turbines to be placed at a site 27 miles east of Virginia Beach. To be exact, in conclusion, as a result, in contrast. Definitely not in contrast. These seem like just specific details of the fact that they're located, wind turbines off the Virginia coast. To be exact makes the most sense to me. It's not in conclusion or as a result because it's not cause and effect. To be exact, just specific evidence of, as the name indicates, they're wind turbines off the coast of Virginia. Okay. Wants to recount the sequence of events proposed by the researchers. Recount the sequence of events proposed by the researchers. So I'm not even looking at the facts. Whatever it is, it's the researchers proposed that this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. According to the researchers' simulations, two events likely occurred around 160 million years ago. First, C came very close to Saturn, and second, debris from Saturn's rings caused the moon to break apart. I don't think it's that one. I think that might be the trick wrong answer. First of all, it says two things occurred around the same time. That doesn't quite seem to be a sequence of events, but close. Let's leave that. If a moon orbiting a planet comes close enough to that planet, well, no, it can't be that, because that's not what the researchers proposed as a sequence of events. Around 160 million years ago, a large moon came close enough to Saturn that tidal forces broke the moon apart. Its debris then formed the planet's rings. That seems better to me than A, but let's leave both for a moment. First, researchers proposed that Saturn was orbited by a large moon. Next, they conducted simulations, and finally they formed... Well, no, this is like a misreading of the question. That's the events of what the researchers did, not the sequence of events that they proposed about what happened in the past. So this is just silly. But why is it C rather than A? This may be one of those where the actual facts are somehow misstated. So, Chrysalis came very close to Saturn. Would likely have come close to Saturn. Yeah. At this distance, Chrysalis would have been broken apart by tidal forces. Hypothesized that the resulting debris formed Saturn's rings. Chrysalis came very close to Saturn, and second, debris from Saturn's rings Oh no, this misstates the facts. This A says debris from Saturn's rings caused the moon to break apart. No, it's the tidal forces caused the moon to break apart, and then the debris turns into the rings. Okay, so there's another reason that it's not A. A was not ideal anyway, but that's factually incorrect. So it's C as in cat. Wants to emphasize the fossil's significance. Again, whatever it is, it's the fossil was important because it did this. Canadian paleobiologist N.R.'s fossil has the skull and teeth of a seal, which, like sea lions and walruses, is a pinniped. I don't think that says why it's important, but let's keep going. Pinnipeds are descended from four-legged land-dwelling carnivores. A fossil that resembles both was recently found. That doesn't say its significance, though. Having four legs but the skull and teeth of a seal, the rare fossil illustrates an early stage in the evolution of pinnipeds from their land-dwelling ancestors. Yes, that seems significant to me. It illustrates an early stage in the evolution. Yes. A, quote, transitional fossil was recently found by... It seems like it should be C, but now let's actually look back at the facts. Yes. Sure. So the actual important outcome is that it's a bridge evolutionary find that shows a transition from water to land-dwelling creatures. So C is the best answer. Wants to emphasize a difference in the origins of the two words. Emphasize a difference in the origins of the two words. Guerdon, a final word of the 2008 Scripps National Spelling Bee, is of Anglo-French origin, while the following year's final word, Laudician, derives from ancient Greek. That actually sounds good. That's a difference in the origin, right? Is Anglo-French versus Greek. In 2008, SM won the Scripps National Spelling Bee by correctly spelling the word Guerdon. However, the following year, KS won the spelling... Well, no, because that doesn't say the origins of the words. KS won the 2009 Scripps National Spelling Bee by correctly spelling Laudician, which derives from ancient... No, because that doesn't emphasize the difference between the two words. It doesn't even mention the other word. The Scripps National Spelling Bee uses words from diverse linguistic origins such as... No, again, that doesn't emphasize the specific difference, so it's A. Wants to emphasize a similarity between the two paintings. Emphasize a similarity between the two paintings. M, a Cree artist, finished his painting in 2019. L, a German artist, completed his in... Definitely not that. That's not similar in any way. That's apart by, 70 years. Although M's painting was inspired by L's, the people and actions the two paintings portray are very different. Definitely not a similarity. L's and M's paintings are both huge, measuring whatever, respectively. That actually seems like an obvious similarity. They're both large. If it matches, yeah. Yep. It's this size and then this size. L's painting depicts Revolutionary War soldiers, while M's depicts indigenous people. Oh no, that's not a similarity. So it's just C.